Hello, I'm Elena, and I will be presenting this week's Friday video on behalf of Mirrix Tapestry and Bead Looms. Today we're going to be talking about heddles. Now what a heddle is it is something to connect a shedding device, which is this, to warp threads. And the reason you need to do that is because the shedding device will lift up certain warp threads to allow you to pass fiber or beads in between. Now you can buy these heddles on our website, www.mirrixlooms.com. There are Tesla of heddles. They come in a roll of 100 and you just cut them apart. The great thing about these heddles is, and all heddles, are they'll last you a really, really long time. You can reuse them again and again and again. But if you don't feel like buying them, you can definitely make your own. There are several ways that you can do this, but a great way is to have a board with 2 finishing nails in it and take a thin but strong thread and just keep tying heddles around those 2 nails. You could also use a piece of cardboard, anything to make sure that the spacing is right. And so you'd want to make the spacing between the nails 3 1/8 inches wide. And we do have instructions on how to do this on our website. So now I'm going to show you how to attach your heddles to your warp threads and to the shedding device. And there are 2 different ways of doing this. One is for tapestry and one is for bead weaving. And I'm going to show you both ways right now. Now here I have a loom. On one side right here, it is warped for tapestry, which means there is 1 warp thread in each dent, which is the space between the springs. On the other side, I have warped for bead weaving with the shedding device, and so there are 2 warp threads in each dent here. So the way you put heddles on is slightly different for both of these different ways. We're going to start with tapestry. Now here is a heddle. You can see exactly what it looks like. It's a loop, basically. And these are really strong, unless you mess up and you cut them in the wrong place, which sometimes happens. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your heddle that looks like this, and you're just going to loop it around a warp thread, just like that. And then you're going to take that and you're going to place it on this bar, which you've moved out a little bit so you can do that, just like that. And then you're going to skip over the next one. So you're going to have a warp thread with a heddle, a warp thread without a heddle, and then another warp thread with a heddle. So we'll do the same thing. We're just going to bring it around and right onto that bar. Now this is a very thin piece, so we're actually finished with just 2. And then if you just had 1 piece on the loom, you would just bring this bar all the way back through. You would tighten it here with an Allen wrench. And next, what you do is take your shedding device and flip it around, just like that. So you can do the other warp threads. So then we'll loosen this one. And actually, you can bring it out to either side, but make sure you can either bring the bar out that way or that way, but make sure you begin putting your heddles on in the right direction. This is such a small piece that it doesn't matter because we only have 1 warp thread right now we need a heddle on. So we have a heddle on this warp thread, so we don't on this one. So we're going to pick up this warp thread just like this. We are going to loop our heddle around, and we're going to do the same thing here. And if we had more, we would keep going just like that. Now, if you have a really wide piece, it's more difficult to do this. Sometimes it's helpful to weave a bar between, on the top here, between warp threads, so you can kind of pull it out and see which one you've already put a heddle on the bottom. So then you're just going to do the same thing, bring this bar back through, tighten it. Now you can see what this does is when you move your shedding device one way, you're going to lift up half your heddles. And when you move your shedding device the other way, you're going to lift the other half. And this way you can put your fiber right in between there, and allows you to weave tapestry much, much faster. So now I'm going to show you how to put heddles on a Mirrix loom for bead weaving. Now the difference in warping for bead weaving using the shedding device is that we have 2 warp threads in every one of these dents, the spaces in the spring. And so all we're going to do is we're going to put a heddle on 1 warp thread in each dent to start. So we do it the same way. We place the heddle around, and then we bring it through just like that. So then we place it on our bar just like before. And so now we're just going to move on to the second dent and grab 1 heddle from there in the same way. And you continue doing this for however long your piece is. So then you replace that screw and then turn your shedding device so you have the other side. So then I'm going to bring this out again. Now, this is really important. You're going to look at which string, which warp thread in each dent has a heddle on it. So here's my first one. And I need to make sure that my second one is to the right of my first warp thread. And this is important because if you did it haphazardly, one to the right, one to the left, one to the right, then your warp threads would get crossed and it would not function correctly. So I'm making sure that this is to the right of my warp thread that already has a heddle on it. I'm going to put this bar through. So then I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to look and I see that this one has a heddle on it. So I'm going to bring this to the right, place my heddle around it just like that, and we're done. So again, you can see that you pull up and make a space, lifting half of your warp threads, and the same in the opposite direction, moving half of your warp threads. Now, one of the most important things when you're putting heddles on is to make sure that you're not making a mistake, because it's a lot easier to prevent a mistake than fix a mistake once it's happened. So be very careful to put your heddles on the correct warp thread, and make sure when you're weaving beads to always bring your second set of heddles, bring your warp threads to the right of the warp thread that already has a heddle on it. So that's it. That is how to put heddles on a Mirrix loom. Again, as I said before, you just have to be very careful and conscious when you're putting your heddles on, so you don't make any mistakes, so you don't have to go back and try to fix any mistakes that you do make. Have a great day. Bye.